You're not angry that they were late. You're angry because it keeps happening. Because you adjusted your morning for them. Because you sat in that restaurant alone for 25 minutes pretending to be busy on your phone, and when they finally walked in, they did not look sorry. They looked inconvenienced by your reaction. And the most disturbing part is not that they were late. It's that some part of you already knew they would be, and you showed up on time anyway. Now, flip it. Maybe you are the one who's always late. Maybe you've promised yourself 100 times that this time will be different. You set 3 alarms, you gave yourself an extra 30 minutes, and somehow you were still walking through that door while everyone was already seated, already mid-conversation, already somewhere you were not. Both of these people are living inside a psychological pattern they do not fully understand. And today, that changes. Because chronic lateness is not about time. It never was. It's about the brain. Specifically, 4 distinct psychological forces that operate almost entirely beneath conscious awareness. And once you see them, you cannot unsee them. The first force is the one that will make you reconsider everything you thought you knew about the chronically late person in your life. Psychologist Russell Barkley, one of the most cited researchers in the world on executive function and attention, spent decades studying what he calls time blindness. Not poor time management, not carelessness, a genuine neurological inability to feel time passing. Here's how it works. In a typical brain, the prefrontal cortex runs a quiet background process, a kind of inner clock that continuously tracks the passage of time, even when you're not thinking about it. You feel the minutes moving. You feel the pressure of an approaching deadline building in your chest before it arrives. In a brain with ADHD, which affects an estimated 5 to 10% of adults, the majority of whom are undiagnosed, that clock is broken. Not slow, not miscalibrated, broken. Time does not accumulate for these people the way it does for you. There's no mounting pressure. There's only now and everything else, which does not feel real or urgent until it's already gone. Barkley puts it precisely. People with ADHD do not live across time. They live in a perpetual present. The dinner reservation in 20 minutes does not feel like 20 minutes away. It does not feel like anything until suddenly it's 10 minutes ago and they're still looking for their keys. This person is not disrespecting you. They're living in a fundamentally different experience of time than you are, and no amount of frustration, ultimatums, or passive-aggressive punctuality on your part will rewire their prefrontal cortex. Telling someone with time blindness to just be on time is like telling someone with color blindness to just see red. The instruction is meaningless. The machinery is not there. But here's where it gets more complicated. Because not every chronically late person has ADHD. For many of them, the brain is working exactly as designed. The problem is that it's designed badly, for punctuality at least. Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize winning psychologist and author of Thinking Fast and Slow, identified a cognitive error so universal it affects virtually every human brain on the planet. He called it the planning fallacy. And it's the reason your colleague who's never on time is also never on time, even though they've been never on time for 11 consecutive years. The planning fallacy works like this. When your brain plans a future task, it doesn't consult your history. It doesn't look back at every previous time you tried to do this thing and factor in how long it actually took. Instead, it constructs an imaginary ideal future, a version of events where traffic is clear. Your phone doesn't distract you, you find parking immediately, and every single thing goes smoothly. And then it uses that fantasy as a forecast. The result is a person who genuinely believes they can shower, get dressed, make coffee, drive across the city, and find parking in 22 minutes. Not because they're stupid, because their brain is running a best-case simulation and presenting it as a plan. The same optimism bias that makes humans fall in love, start companies, and believe they'll be the exception is also the thing making someone 40 minutes late to your birthday dinner while feeling completely justified about it. The chronically late optimist is not lying to you when they say they thought they had enough time. Their brain gave them a forecast. It just forgot to consult reality. Now we reach the territory that is genuinely uncomfortable. Because for a subset of chronically late people, and this is documented, researched, and clinically observed, lateness is not a neurological glitch or a cognitive bias. It's a psychological tool, unconscious, unacknowledged, and remarkably effective. Psychotherapist Dr. Leon Seltzer has written in depth about what he calls the covert power of lateness. His observation is deceptively simple. The person who is always late controls every room they walk into, not loudly, not consciously, but structurally. Think about it. When someone is chronically late, everyone waits, everyone adjusts, everyone restructures their plans, their conversations, their emotional state around the absent person. Their entrance has weight. Their time has been implicitly valued above everyone else's, and they didn't have to say a single word to make that happen. Seltzer argues that for people who struggle with feelings of powerlessness, invisibility, or lack of control in their daily lives, lateness becomes a reliable, unconscious mechanism of asserting significance. It's not malicious. It's adaptive, in the most dysfunctional sense of the word. Then there's what psychologists call counterdependence, a deep psychological resistance to external structure and other people's expectations. For the counterdependent individual, being on time does not feel neutral. It feels like submission. It feels like someone else's schedule has authority over their life. And on some primal level, that's intolerable. So, they're late. Not to punish you, not even to make a statement, but because punctuality to their nervous system feels like surrender, and their brain will manufacture any number of plausible explanations, traffic, losing track of time, one last thing, to protect them from having to see that clearly. Sometimes lateness isn't a failure of time management. It's a carefully constructed, entirely unconscious performance of power. There's one final psychological profile, and it's the one that almost never gets discussed because it looks exactly the same from the outside. For some people, chronic lateness is driven entirely by anxiety, specifically what researchers call arrival anxiety, the acute psychological discomfort of being the first person to arrive somewhere. Being first means walking into an empty or half-empty room. It means being seen entering. It means sitting alone in a social space while others trickle in. For someone with social anxiety, that threshold moment, the arrival itself, is genuinely frightening in a way that is difficult to articulate and almost impossible to explain to someone who hasn't felt it. Lateness solves this problem cleanly. If you arrive after everyone else, the room is already alive. Your entrance dissolves into the existing noise. Nobody turns, nobody watches you figure out where to sit. The social gauntlet of the arrival simply does not exist. It's avoidance behavior, the same psychological mechanism that keeps people from going to the doctor, sending difficult emails, or having necessary conversations. It removes immediate discomfort so efficiently that the brain begins to rely on it. And meanwhile, the relationships quietly erode, the reputation solidifies, and the anxiety itself grows larger because it has never once been faced. So, here's what we actually know about the person who is always late. Sometimes their brain can't feel time passing. Sometimes their optimism is so structurally embedded that reality cannot compete with their best-case forecast. Sometimes their lateness is doing quiet psychological work that they've never examined and would be genuinely disturbed to see clearly. And sometimes they're simply trying to avoid the feeling of walking into a room alone. None of this excuses the behavior. The people who wait are real. The cost they carry is real. Chronic lateness damages trust in ways that accumulate silently and break things that cannot always be repaired. But psychology is never in the business of excuses. It's in the business of understanding. And understanding is what separates a conversation that changes something from an argument that changes nothing. If you're the one who waits, you now know what you're actually dealing with, and that knowledge is the only thing that will help you decide what to do about it. If you're the one who is always late,
Somewhere in what you just heard, there was probably a moment of recognition, a quiet, uncomfortable flicker of something true. That flicker is not an accusation, it's an invitation. The question is whether you're willing to look at it. This is what psychology actually does when it's done properly. It doesn't tell you who to blame, it shows you what's underneath, and then it hands the decision back to you. New video every week on this channel. The science of why people do what they do, feel what they feel, and become who they become. If that's the conversation you want to keep having, subscribe. I'll see you next week.